Well then, welcome back to This is the Year, the Swiss AI podcast, where we aim to deconstruct all things AI that happened in the last week. As you will see in today's episode, we also look ahead in the future and deconstruct a few of the agentic use cases that you as a Swiss business or a Swiss future startup could be implementing from your side. I'm your host and moderator, Cyril, and I'm joined today by the usual two gentlemen. First of all, we have the AI wizard. He is summoning AI agents all across Switzerland, soon to be used by millions of Swiss individuals, perhaps without them even knowing this is AI. So, how is life? How is your movement going in your new house? Any update on this front before we start?
Life's good. Moving is hard, but Gen AI somewhat makes it easier. There was a problem with my dishwasher. I started having water all over the place, and I fixed it with Gen AI. And some tools, there's still that physical component. But instead of calling a plumber, which maybe would cost me $60, and have to wait for it, I searched out around what was happening. I got some solutions, and it was really easy to do. So Gen AI is for business, but also for your personal life, and highly recommended.
Such as moving to a house that you just bought. That's good to hear. Then, with us today as well, the AI magician. He is mostly concerned about making sure these AIs are actually working, testing, prompt engineering, and much more. Bene, how is life? How is Portugal treating you currently?
Life is good, but the weather isn't the best. Last week we were traveling. When we got here, the weather was amazing, but this week started to rain. It's typical from Portugal. There's this saying, "April waters a thousand." It's just typical, and the moment April started, rain started here. So still, it's rain. We enjoy it. It's good for everyone. Great.
I think it's good for me. For once, my Swiss weather is beating your Portuguese weather, so that's always good, always good for me. Yeah, so then just for the audience, once again, I will plot that here. We'll shoot these episodes every single week. In this particular episode, we are talking about a new open weight model by OpenAI. I will plot that at the end of the show. And let's kick it off with a few of the notions that we've received actually from the audience. Quick disclaimer, if you have anything we should be mentioning in a show or deconstructing in a future episode, feel free to drop and comment. And the first question that we received, what is the difference between an AI agent, a chatbot, and a voicebot? I believe there is some general misunderstanding sometimes if it's the same, if it's completely different, what might be changing in the future. So I'll leave this in the room for you guys to take from here. Maybe Ben, and we can start with you. What's the difference between a chat and a voice bot? What are the same things? And then maybe Joao for you for the agents.
Okay. To simplify the backbone of all of them right now, they should be built the same way. It's just adding an extra layer of component to process from the voice to text, and then in the backend we do the whole processing, similar from chat to voice. And then here we can plug in something as an AI agent or just use LLM. There's differences that the wizard is going to explain in a bit, but this is the overall difference. Voice solutions are not fully fully implemented so far, only for call centers. Those have been the heavier use cases, and for the chatbots, they have been more implemented not just for customer-facing solutions but for internal solutions. And we could start using more voice, but passing the
Yeah, you
ball
were
to
a big
yeah,
proponent on voice. I think every time I talk to you, Ben, you're talking about voice.
yeah. Come on,
Just
like
for
it's go.
not just for the audience. So the difference would be that the base layer is anyway a chatbot. You just add a voice or a text to voice and a voice to text model on top of it, and it basically becomes, let's say, a voice model used in call centers at scale. For example, in Switzerland, if you have a call center, you might be using the two of them, a chatbot for your application or for your website, and a chat or a voice-enabled chatbot basically for your customer-facing call center. Is that more or less the right
Yeah,
understanding,
yes.
or am I missing something?
Yeah, and you
There's
might
some
make some
fine
adjustments.
tweaks. Yeah, there's some fine tweaks between the chat and the voice, because we don't want the how the bot expresses or says stuff. We don't want to be the same. We don't want for the voice to be long and to provide the source of truth. We don't need that.
Imagine you'd be on a call and you'd get a link saying, "Hey, here's how you can do this. Go on www dot," and then you get a really long link. And like, I really can't click on that. This is a phone call. So some instructions may vary on and the size of the answers and the formality of them might differ, but voicebots should be on the most part just chatbots with that voice component. For the agents themselves, an agent is basically the LLM, so these super large language models that are getting better and better every week, with tools to interact with the world. And tools might be something like reading your email or sending and writing out an email in your behalf. Could be something like searching the web or searching something on your knowledge base as a business. So on your documentation on how you do things, both on HR department, both on how to deal with customers. And so those tools interact with LLM, which might be very agnostic of what business are you running. And those tools allow it to interact with your business and know more about it. So it's not just a general ChatGPT, it's your GPT for your business that does things the way that you'd want. And
I do have a question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead, Benner.
Of course, I understand, but for the audience, just to clarify, so each tool I have, let's say a search, would make an agent, or an agent should be composed with many tools. How would you define this? Because for me, it's like, okay, is it better to define specific tools and this is an agent, or we can just put everything inside and it's an agent?
So I think there's two different questions there. I think an agent, if an LLM has a single tool, it becomes an agent. So ChatGPT at the beginning wasn't an agent; it was just an LLM with a chat interface, right? It had a prompt that a base prompt for OpenAI that defined for how ChatGPT should behave. A lot of people worked to get that out of the system. And then I think a few months ago, they added the search. So you could enable this node. You'd see it on the chatbot, and you'd ask things about how the stock market is doing. And instead of asking and replying with information from months ago, the bot could actually go online and see how the stock market was doing and tell you. So from the moment they had this search tool, it became an agent. It's not always an agent when you interact with ChatGPT, but right now, in most cases, it is. It also has the memory tool, which you're talking to it and it can write down specific memories about you. And sometimes you see the memory updated line on the bottom of ChatGPT. Also, other chatbots do this. I use ChatGPT because it became kind of the Tupperware of LLMs and Gen AI in general. But it writes things about you that might be useful in the future. So it always has these tools. Tools allow LLMs to become more productive and more useful.
So memory is a tool, or it's a different component to an agent? Just that we have it, let's say on an anatomy layer, we have it clear. It's a tool, or it's not a tool, the knowledge itself?
Memory doesn't have to be a tool. A tool is a way to write and get memories, but memories itself is a component. You could have custom code to do it. You could define a very specific memory for different customers, or a memory that evolves over the conversation and could be just your code. The LM had nothing to do with it, so you wouldn't need any tools. Tools are just a really useful way for the agent to actually write, update, and get those memories back and use them. The other question Benny was doing is how many tools do you actually want or do you actually need? If you're having a business and you want a customer support agent, right? You'd want tools, but probably not all of them, not at the same time, because you'd have an LLM that has access to 30 different tools. It might get confused to choosing which one is more useful at a given time. So there's a slight trade-off in building a super enabled agent that has a lot of tools and building very specific agents that only have one. And the best balance, I'd say, is you find specific use cases. Each agent should have maybe around 5, 6, even 10 tools, as long as they all do different things, so the agent doesn't get confused. And then it can pass off and do what we call the handover, which is agents that realize, hey, I can't actually do this, but there's this other agent that can, and they, on the background, before you even know it, hand over to a different agent that he's enabled to do what you want. And so you have specific agents for specific use cases. And this is a really useful way to create a whole team, squad, or even a department to handle your business. So each agent does a specific thing. They're trained and they're instructed to do a specific thing, and they're enabled through tools to pull it off.
Okay. I want you to quickly zoom out a little bit. So the agent has an LLM component. It has some sort of memory component on and off if you need that. It has certain tools. What is another missing part of an agent? I mean, the prompts are the same as a regular chatbot or a voice bot, or you have to have it prompted in a different way, the agent?
Usually, tools are part of the instructions. On the background, there's a very specific way to define tools so that these LLMs can actually call them, and you don't get any text back. You only get like this interaction with the tools. And whenever the LLM decides that it actually has an answer for you, then it'll give out the text for the user. But in the meanwhile, it'll use tools. But these instructions might have a tool component, but it will be very similar to the instructions on a chatbot or a voice bot. They're not about the tools, they're about what you want the agent to do. So if you want an agent to handle, for example, changing someone else's information. So a person calls and wants to change their billing address, or they want to change what type of account they have. Then you have an agent specific to do that. And those instructions would be about that. The tools are also part of it, but just a way to enable the agent to do the change of information.
Okay, so just to clarify, so agent is the LLM model, you have tools, and then you have components. The tool, the specific task of the agent is to have these tools to interact with several components. Either it's memory, either it's knowledge, whatever we need to interact, it's the component. As Cyril was saying, like the memory is not a tool, it's a component. The web search, the engine that we're doing the search is the component, not the tool. It's the function, sorry for the technicality, it's the function that we actually have to use. That's the tool.
Maybe if just for that's a general question, just because I'm curious. I mean, there's a lot of understanding, or at least media push, that we have these autonomous armies of agents. So to what extent can you scale one agent? I mean, we just took one apart, basically the anatomy of an agent we more or less took apart, but you can have like 50, 100 of these agents at the same time. Like, how many degrees of freedom or control you have as a developer on these multiple agents, or are they completely autonomous in 2025?
Agents themselves, I think they're independent. And you could have 100 agents, but unless you're trying to simulate a whole government or a whole country, I don't think you need 100 agents. For even the most complex use cases, an agent doesn't have to do a single thing, right? ChatGPT can search, but can also write whatever email you want, or you can interact with your calendar and check what events you have for the day. So it's not necessarily that you need a very, very specific agent and you need to end up with hundreds of thousands of agents. Even for the most complex use cases, I'd say around 10 to 15 agents would cover most cases. And an agent can know about other agents, so you can hand off the conversation and interaction to other agents. But you can also have different, we call them topologies, which is ways to arrange them. Maybe you have an agent as a supervisor and looks at all the other agents and decides which agent would be the best one for the interaction and just do the handover themselves. There's a lot of ways to connect them, and there's a whole like field of topology on how to actually orchestrate these agents. But now we're getting the field of agent orchestration, or in this case, multi-agent orchestration, which is very interesting, but is highly dependent on the use case you want.
Maybe just for to plot that also at the later stage of the podcast, we will quickly be discussing a few of the use cases. But I have another question just on the sense of, let's say if the LLM is the brain of the agent, like how do you choose the right LLM, basically the right brain for each agent? Like is it depending on the actual small task the agent needs to do, and then you derive from there the, let's say, best quality to price ratio LLM choice? Or how do you choose the best brain for each of these agents?
Ben, do you have an opinion? I'd love to disagree with you, because I have very strong opinions on this.
Regarding this, I have two different perspectives. You have the first one, new is always better, because normally the newer models, they tend to be more efficient. Something on the newer models tends to be better to either to reply better, and these models are very general, so they would cover most of the cases. But then, depending on the task, you don't want the newest model or the biggest model because you want fast inferencing. So you would need to pick still a good model, and the newer ones are really good. But you can pick different size of brain. You don't always need a monster I need a better analogy. Shit. Do
Well,
you
I was
have
just
one?
gonna say
I think
monster for an AI is probably not a
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
good
No,
analogy.
there's several analogies. Like you don't need Usain Bolt to go to do a shopping for you. You can just pick someone else. But if you want someone run to help you run away from something, you pick
Depends
someone
of how
fast.
hungry you are,
Yeah.
right? So you might
You
want
know
to
that
run very
hangry,
fast.
the
Yeah,
hangry
exactly.
people.
I mean, specifically in the context of Swiss business, there's this extra component which is availability. So there's this a lot of new models, but not all of them are in Switzerland, not all of them are in Europe even. And so you have this extra constraint of choosing the model is knowing what models you have available. And so you have these three major cloud providers, but you also have these smaller, very custom providers just for LLMs, specifically for the companies that make them. Like Anthropic has their own system to provide the cloud models. OpenAI also has their own system. You don't have to use Microsoft or AWS or Google. But there's also these third-party providers, which is basically data centers, a lot of GPUs that sell you this inference and to these models. Switzerland is not super equipped right now with these data centers. And so worldwide, there's a shortage of GPUs. It's no different in Switzerland. It's no different in Europe. And so you have to navigate these extra constraints of what models you have available. So new might always be better, hopefully. I mean, if it wasn't, they wouldn't release the model. They're releasing it. It's always a bit of a PR stunt to actually have it better. But you also have to understand what clouds are you using and what models you have available there. Because sometimes, and this is like an important topic, when you're building these systems, it is super important to stay agnostic of what models you're using. So you're building with
Agnostic
OpenAI's.
meaning what exactly?
It,
Just for the audience.
so it shouldn't matter what LLM you're using, right? The LLM, of course, influences the kind of answer you get. But if you build a system and it's a really good system and you're using OpenAI's GPT models for it, maybe tomorrow GPT, because of like all the constraints and geopolitical warfare that's going around, maybe you want to change to Anthropic or want to change to a Chinese provider. And if a good system is in place, then with a couple lines of code, you can start using a different model, a different LLM. And the same behavior stays, and the same behavior, the same usefulness of the agent should be able to stay. Ben is
I
frowning at
disagree
my
with
idea.
that. Yeah, I disagree with that because I can kind of joke about this because we already talked about this on the previous episode. Each model already has their personality, man.
They do, they do.
You need different prompting. So it's like, of course, you can plug in the model with the different lines of code, but then you will need to test and to make sure the quality is still there. Stuff change because even though they are great models, they are on the same level. Their behavior changes. So yes, the good product you could just plug in the model, but then you need to retest to make sure you didn't lose or you're not adding anything that might go wrong.
But hopefully your business idea and your business agent doesn't really rely on personality. Hopefully. Because I can call a human-based customer center and I'll get 5 different people with 5 different personalities. But hopefully all 5 of them would be able to do what I want them to do. So yes, it's important to have like this test suite in place, test sets and test use cases to know that different LLMs can still pull off what you want it to
Exactly.
do, but they will be able to respond differently, and you have to be prepared for that. But also be prepared for change because different models are coming around
Exactly.
every few weeks, and sometimes it can get a very similar performance for a much cheaper price. And for this, like highly costs, like they have like very very high costs to run, so you can get a cheaper model. You can cut your operational costs by half, and that's not something you really want to pass on this early stage in the game.
I think it's a, a good time to quickly wrap up. So there's three vectors of decision. The first one is the price of running it, basically the quality of or the complexity of the task, the analogy of Usain Bolt running for groceries. You don't always need the best model for the best use cases. And as a small constraint for Switzerland, especially if you're a Swiss business running or aiming to be building agents, is the availability of these models in the first place. So these are probably the three vectors I would draw. Again, price, quality, best ratio on these two. And then still having this small constraint in Switzerland that not all of these models are in all the cloud providers. Clouds, just for the audience quickly, is GCP, so Google, the Google Cloud, AWS, the Amazon Web Services Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, the basically Microsoft-based cloud. There's some other cloud providers as well. So you ideally would be running these agents in one of these, let's say, usual three suspects in Switzerland, meaning the inference. Also, to quickly run around that topic up, Ben, I was mentioning before, inference meaning at the time when there is a request happening, the agent is kind of executing the thinking, basically giving you a feedback in form of text or in form of an action. It's actually doing something called inference. So it's basically thinking and executing like a human would be doing. So I think we rounded up the first basically large array of topics around agents, around prompts, LLMs. We talked about memory. Something I quickly wanted to zoom in also, especially important as a Swiss business, as a Swiss future aspiring entrepreneur building SaaS as well, is the notion of tools. How do these tools potentially access the subsystems in different company contexts? Because an isolated agent is probably fairly useless. It can just give some sort of feedback via text or voice. How do you interact with the system, basically? So that's my second notion here. Joao, do you want to take it from here, and then Bene rounds up once again, or challenges? Maybe again he doesn't agree.
Tools are exactly that, a way for the LLM to interact with the real world or your business. So far, there's been a lot of ways to do these tools. OpenAI had the first idea on how to make them. They were the first provider with an LLM that was actually capable of using tools. Nowadays, I think most of LLMs are able to use tools natively. They're trained to do that, and there's been a benchmark. When an LLM comes out and it's released and announced, they show it how good it is at using tools, because it's becoming an ever-increasing important topic. And so, how to build them? There's a lot of ways. I think there's a new standard coming around called MCP. They were proposed by Anthropic, which is also one of the big players in creating these LLMs. So it's a standardized way of creating tools and having them available to LLMs. Basically, each tool is its own server, and it can be on your business, so it can be running on your servers, interacting with, let's say, your client base. So you have some kind of CRM software with all your client information, billing addresses, what account they have, what they're doing, and what they're using. And a tool, or let's say 2 or 3 tools, would be a way to list those users, get information about specific users, and maybe interact them and edit them so you can update them in real time. And you'd build this, let's say 3 tools, have them available to the LLM, and connect it to your agent. Then this is highly dependent on where you're running your agent and how you're doing it. But hopefully with this MCP approach, there's a standardized way, and you can use not only your tools, so you build specific tools for your specific software and services, but you can also possibly use tools that are available online. So there's a startup called Tavily that has like search tools for the web. Like LLMs can't really use Google like people do. They're not clicking around and going through pages, but they can and they should be able to go online and search for things. So Tavily built these tools publicly available, so any LLM can use them for a price, of course. This is a business, after all. And they can do search on Tavily's search tools, and they get results specifically tailored for LLMs in a specific format that works for LLMs. So it's formatted that they can understand the web much better.
Maybe an analogy is like in the gold rush, right? So you're basically provisioning the shovels, and you have a shovel shop basically. So in order for you to dig for the gold, in the ancient times, maybe for the audience, it's common knowledge, but most people made a lot of money by providing the shovels as opposed to just getting the actual gold off the ground. So this is maybe the same analogy. I don't know, Benny, if you want to mention that, or do you have a different, maybe disagreeing viewpoint than
No, I
Shao was
agree
saying?
with that, because we were talking about these things earlier, and I really love that analogy. It's not using bolts running from groceries, but it's a good analogy as well.
It's not on this level, but it's actually maybe a good segue if we quickly want to pivot to the last or second last topic for today's show. It's really about these, let's say, business use cases, maybe even a business idea. If you want to be building a startup, or if you are a Swiss business and is aiming to be implementing AI agents all across so-called verticals. So you can think about an AI agent First, probably most likely to be augmenting a Swiss professional. And Joao quickly mentioned another notion is basically having a shop or a tool shop where you basically would be providing the shovels to the agent. But if we quickly segue to, let's say, a few of the business ideas, I just noted down like 6 or 7 that I think for Switzerland, but even in Europe, all around the world are fairly interesting. The first one is the compliance AI agent. I think it's one of these things in Switzerland. We are a famous banking country, and there's many regulatory constraints on compliance in Switzerland. And it's certainly a domain. If I would be a Swiss financial industry participant, if I would be maybe a smaller bank, maybe a larger bank, or just also some other associated financial services requiring to comply to these compliance standards, that I would probably delve in a little bit, try to understand the notion of how much of the workflows can we agentize. And here's maybe just my plot on that notion. I mean, ideally, you would have probably 3 to 4 agents, and each of these agents, probably Shao, you disagree again because it's just one agent having different tools, but I think of it as like employees today having 4 or 5 different agents, and each of these agents that do a different task. So one agent could be analyzing customer relationships or analyzing a particular context. The second one could be then drafting a questionnaire, for example, to be sent to a client. The third one would then analyze the feedback of the customer, and maybe the fourth one would then draft the report. Does that make sense just as an overall idea of how we could be implementing that, or it's completely wrong in the thinking?
It does make sense. It's like comparison of having like one super enabled agent or 4 or 5 is very comparable to having a human-based department. So you could hire someone to do like this very specific thing, and eventually they'd be very good at that one specific thing. But you also end up with 30 different people at your department, and eventually it'd be hard to manage. So I think 5 or 6 is a good balance to do that. And yeah, you can have these agents interact with themselves. We talked about Voicebots and Chatbots, but agents don't need to have this interface to humans directly. They can just be agents to help other agents. For example, you could have contracts going through email, right? And they're being discussed with lawyers, currently not AI agents. And when you get the contract signed, eventually someone has to go to the contract, open the PDF, and copy all the information back to your CRM software. So all the numbers that were agreed on, date that was agreed on, and that's a time-consuming task. It's a really simple one, but it's time-consuming and kind of boring that someone has to go through all those lengthy PDFs. That's someone an agent can do. So an agent that has no chatbot or no voice bot interface is just going to the contract. Every time you get a final signed contract, it updates your CRM software. The same way, for example, in admission in a hospital or in those clinics, when you have to sign a form, there's a lot of good software that can analyze those handwritten papers and can scan them and get information out. And then you can have an agent that looks at that information and then goes to your software and updates the CRM. Maybe it's in 3 different databases. You can go to all 3 different of them and have the information from the paper to your service, and you don't have to spend some secretary's time and work to do that.
I think that's a great notion. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a true believer that at least in 2025, maybe next year, AI is not replacing any humans yet in most of the jobs potentially in Switzerland. Rather, it's probably augmenting professionals to be more efficient, more effective, and especially doing most of the heavy lifting on the anyway cumbersome tasks. I think that's probably one of the more overlooked items in AI, as opposed to just the constant maybe negative notions on AI. It's actually you as a professional, you can pretty much just outsource the tedious work, the tedious admin work most of the time to such an AI system. It's fairly good at this. It's fairly parallelizable. You can do multiple of these requests at the same time, meaning multiple questionnaires at the same time, meaning multiple analysis at the same time. And you as a professional, you'll literally be augmented to be just leading basically a virtual army of agents. And you're just making sure the orchestration works. You're giving feedback, and you're just a lot more effective and a lot more efficient as a Swiss professional. So I think it's in 2025 definitely going into this direction. I just like the fact that this compliance workflow, just as an example, it's one of these things as a positive notion also for businesses. It's parallelizable again, meaning that you might have, instead of one compliance check done at the same time within 20 to 25 minutes by an officer, you can have 50 or 100 of them at the same time. and the officer would simply be reviewing the first initial analysis. Then it goes into the questionnaire drafting. Maybe from 100 relationship, it needs 45 questionnaires, meaning the officer again goes through them, reviews them, and then they are shipped to the customer. They're coming back. And here I'm quickly just, let's say, plotting another episode that we talked about OCR models. So in order to be reading documents, you can use something called OCR. There was one model plugged by and released by Mistral. And we talked about that in another episode. I would link that below in the description for you to check out if you're interested. So that's another one of these agent models that most likely in this workflow as a compliance agent, you would probably need to use one of these OCR models as well. And then it goes into the reporting end of the workflow. Might be super specific to most people in the audience, but at the end, there will be a report written. And this is just fairly generic work that a lot of without going into much of the details. Of course, this comes with challenges. In Switzerland, it's highly regulated, so you might need to check for data security. You might want to check for SOC or ISO certifications on your service. So it's not like a low-hanging fruit entirely, this particular process. It's just one of the more complex one that I can see being agentized in 2025. Also, the other one, I just, maybe for you, Ben, it was more on the transcription side of things. So you might have a transcription AI agent for life coaches, psychotherapists, doctors, or even researchers that is transcribing voice to text. How would you go about maybe building such an agent system? Let's say we're building it for a researcher, like a Swiss university postdoc researcher. She or he is doing a lot of interviews with many, many people. How could such a system be maybe just fabricated in the first place?
I don't think for that you actually would need. You could have agentic approach, but you wouldn't necessarily need an agentic approach here. But for the purposes of this exercise,
Let's say it's not
let's
just a transcription, like it's a
no, yeah,
transcription, then it helps in
yes.
the drafting, analysis, and maybe the
So
submission of a grant, for example.
so the workflow would be to have a, let's say, a UI. We don't need the chat interface. A UI for the person to put the audio file, and then would define the tasks that he would want to achieve with that audio file. If he wanted just to store, if he wanted to summarize, and if he wanted insights, then I would say, let's say, I would tick those. It is more upper level approach. I would tick those, and then everything would happen in the backend. Some of the things would need to be sequential, and the other ones could be parallel. Initially, the transcription. The other tasks would be sequential after the transcription, and then every other task could be run in parallel. And then at the end, the person would get a notification. Hey, it's done. Let's check
I think
the work I've
it's
done.
again one of these things, right? I mean, but just this week, I had a quick chat with a fellow lecturer at my university that I'm teaching, and this particular professional, or I mean, it's a postdoc researcher. She was spending multiple hours on just drafting the grants, did like a night shift, and it was fairly an intense time. I just thought this is again a perfect use case that you have such a research grant AI agent slash assistant, and it would just help you along the whole value journey of a Swiss researcher in first drafting the grant. And then basically knowing everything about the grant, you can just be implementing that into the research process. You can use transcription agents, analyst agent. Again, we should probably debate for 20 more minutes if a multiple agent makes sense, or one or two agents with
A
tools.
quick add there.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, a quick add there, as you were saying, researchers. Normally, people who research, they like sometimes to record ideas, and this could again be useful to have this implemented in the system. You have on your phone the app, you would record, and this would go to the system, feeding it, and then at the end, he would summarize things that you probably even forgot. And this can wrap everything, every idea, and put everything summarized for you to see. And this would save a lot of work as well.
In the context of writing applications for grants, which happens at the research level, but also happens in a company level, right? There's contracts that are very similar to how grants work. There's contracts they need to fulfill, and they have to see whether they can fulfill them and what the contract actually requires. And so for that workflow, you'd have an agent analyzes the requirements of the contract or the grant. So I'm doing this for both researchers and businesses alike, which is a very similar workflow. You analyze the requirements of the grant or the contract through an agent, right? And the agent has tools to read the contract and get summarized versions and summarized parts of it, so everything is in a very standardized way, and basically bullet points of the requirements that are in a contract. Another agent would be the matching agent. So you'd go look into your business or to your researcher, to your profile, to your academic background, and see whether your research aligns with that grant or your business does align with the contract. And it says it goes through your business knowledge base or to your academic papers and sees what you've been doing and can do the matching. So to each bullet point, can you do it? Can you not? And if it has questions, there could be a third tool, let's say, which is ask the human. So in the business side, they would ask a supervisor or a manager. On the researcher side, it would ask the researcher directly. And you could have write you an email with questions. It could answer it through email if you wanted to. So you don't have to wait for it while it happens. And then this third agent would write the report. And usually, to have the best kind of reports, this is a technique that's been used for quite a few years, is you have two agents. One is writing the report, and one is critiquing it. So it's looking at overall the requirements, your business needs, and what your business is, and would compare them the two and say, actually, you could change this report to be this, or it doesn't include that one requirement that a contract is mentioning. And the writer would keep rewriting until the critiquer and then the one doing the critique accepts. So you end up with a really good report that matches all the requirements and that is fit just for you. And you'd save hopefully hours of writing it yourself.
I think it's really to maybe just draw an intermediate summary. There's probably just two notions that Swiss businesses are really probably thinking right now when they're listening to this. First, what's going on with my data? Where is my proprietary data being stored? In the compliance case, it's highly sensitive. In the grant case, it might be sensitive. In the grant case, it might also be very sensitive for procurement departments, for example. That is why generally, again, feel free to disagree in the comments, that we believe that these, let's say, low to no code tools are by far not sufficient to be engineering such agentic solutions, just because, again, the data you don't want to be floating on the internet. You want to have it properly secure in Switzerland. And I think that's probably one of the core ingredients that if you're intending to be building such solutions in 2025, that you have to be having covered as well. I have one last, let's say, honorable mention as a different idea. This is basically a human in the loop SaaS. So ideally, as a business, you would not want probably in 2025 to be having everything done by agents completely autonomously. You most likely would want to be engineering by yourself, or you could be building such a tool in-house or for a SaaS approach. A human in the loop UI that's basically giving the most streamlined workflow to the professionals for them to give reviews, feedbacks, and approvals, what's coming from and back to the agent. So that's probably the last honorable mention. For just a few of the business ideas, of course, I have like 15 other noted down now, but maybe we park that for a future episode. Just to wrap it up, we talked about the compliance agent, specialized knowledge in financial services, super interesting. We talked about a grant agent, a procurement agent. We talked about just on a very high level, some agentic use cases. We talked about modular agents in the sense of you can have them plugged in and plugged out. We talked about data security, and we talked today also where these agents are actually running. This is not in some sort of server. 99.9% of the cases in the basement of all these companies, it's most likely with a high probability in a so-called hyperscaler setup, AWS, Google Cloud, or Amazon Web Services. Gentlemen, I have one more just very brief, quick roundup topic. It's the announcement of ChatGPT's open weight model. Why is that somewhat interesting, and what could we expect from this new model, probably coming out in the next few weeks?
Bennett, you're the one that's always loving the next new shiny thing. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, because I'm highly skeptical of what OpenAI is releasing. OpenAI has made a very pretty buck selling GPT access with ChatGPT Premium and ChatGPT Plus and all the subscription models they'll still release eventually. And so I don't know what's the business idea and the business case for them to release an open weights model at this stage.
It's the first one since GPT-2 that they open sourced, and maybe I have a notion on this, how open source it is, but it's the first one since ChatGPT-2 that I actually somewhat opened up. Yeah. But yeah, Bene,
Yeah.
to you maybe quickly.
Initially, just to clarify for viewers to understand, you have open source models. What's fully open source is models who have, we can have explanations in the link. You can have open weights. You can have fully open source, which not only open weights, open on how they train the model, and then the fully open source, it's open weights, open on the techniques they use and the data. Most of the open source models, they don't have the training data that they used. It's just weights and techniques. And the GPT, the open source, is just open weights. And just to
Yeah, it's
clarify
kind of a
that.
bit of a clickbait. I first read it's an open source model, and then I went into the details. It's just open weight model, so they don't give away the data.
Yeah. And then even from these models, you have different licenses on how you could use them. And again, this can be on the descriptions. My opinion regarding the open source open weight model from OpenAI is just a marketing strategy to say, hey, we're releasing something open, but by the end of the year, we're going to become a profitable company. Because I don't know if you read, they got a financial round, and they got promised, I think, $40 billion dollars only if they become turn into a profitable company. If they don't, the amount they get is halved. So I think this is a marketing strategy to like, oh,
As
we're coming
usually,
back
it's
to
a
the
marketing
roots,
plot.
but then we're going to move to make money.
Okay, so we quickly open up OpenAI to be open-ish source, and then we close it up to be closed AI once again.
It's very profitable though. And to give some context to the viewers and the listeners out there, open weights means that you can get the model and run them yourself on a GPU, if you have the GPU for that. Usually it means that the model will be available at these third-party providers that have a lot of GPUs and will sell you the LLM at usually a small cost. But open weights, that usually means that you can run the model yourself, and anyone could run the model. Open source means you could actually build a model yourself from scratch, but then again, that's very rare, and companies don't love to do that because they've been spending a lot of money on researchers to come up with new techniques, and then they'll just be giving it away for free at the public, which for science would be amazing. On a business case, might not be as good.
Another DeepSeek did that, no? On the paper, they opened the techniques that they use for training.
But DeepSeek was very chaotic.
I'm not an expert on licenses whatsoever. It's not my background, but I think DeepSeek is the most open source possible model under the MIT license. I think they open sourced, or they gave away as much of the possible knowledge as you can possibly get under this license. For example, also the Llama models by Meta. Before we wrap up, maybe just this notion. It's technically open source, but if you run it in high workloads, meaning just a large volume of usage, it's not technically open source anymore. But this is maybe a conversation we can shift to some future episode. Good. Guys, I think that was it for today. Any last comments on what's going on the weekend? I think in Switzerland I have good weather, so I'm definitely enjoying, probably more than you. But yeah, any last comments just for the audience before we wrap up?
We do have good. The weather is going to be better in over the weekend. I think it's not going to rain, and it's going to be warmer than that.
Expect more from Lisbon in the first place. Okay, then good.
But
Let's wrap it up.
okay. This is the year, man.
This
Again,
is
we'll
the
keep
year.
repeating.
You meant
This
you
is the year.
plotted it again. I was asking for Joao for this comment. You already took it away. Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for yet another episode. This was episode number 4. For the audience, we plan to do this every single week. We're on a strike. We haven't missed yet a single upload. We reached around 100,000 views across social media. So we're literally just getting started. If you're interested in learning more about AI, agentic AI in 2025, definitely consider following this show. We're active on Spotify and on YouTube. And with that said, gentlemen, see you in the next episode. And this is the year. Take care.
Take care.
See you around.